A lot of folks are saying, wow, this feels like some earlier moment, perhaps before World War I. Especially think about how Europeans are thinking about this, because their countries, their nation states are so much older than America. America's such a young country. We're caught up in this sort of American fascism, and we're having this hysterical moment. But from folks looking abroad, are they like, man, get over it. Yeah, this stinks, but, you're a young country and other things will happen.
No, I don't think so. I think people are like, we've been there. It's not a good place to be. But, on that, I actually think in some ways that, well, first of all, that democracy would not have survived in Europe in the 20th century if it hadn't been for America. And that if multi-ethnic democracy is going to work anywhere in the world, it is going to be in North America. And Canada perhaps is an even easier ride of it than the United States. European nations have a deeply mono-ethnic and monocultural conception of who they are. They're very slowly dealing with the effects of a pretty extensive migration they had over the last 50 years. And starting to accept that, perhaps German can be black or brown as well as white. But a lot of people don't want to accept that. Now, the United States has always been a sort of unequal multi-ethnic democracy, right? With a very steep racial hierarchy and obviously a tremendous amount of historical injustice. But at least there's a baseline acceptance among really a large majority of Americans that you can be black and be American, you can be brown and be American, you can be Asian and be American. And so if this sort of attempt to build an equal multi-ethnic democracy fails in the United States, I don't see much hope for it in Europe either.
I mean, that's why Trump is so scary, and especially, even looking at the Republican Party from the civil rights movement onward with the Southern strategy. But Trump was just so genius in his way that he evoked or invoked sort of this hair invoke ideology, sort of this blood and soil racism, and really called back when he's talking about the lost Americans or forgotten Americans or make America great again. That's an explicitly racial appeal. And the way that he was able to do that with that sort of hair invoke ethic and also sort of right-wing producerism, literally it was out of a textbook. And you're sitting there, if you have the vocabulary and the framework, you're watching it happen and you're trying to warn people. I know I did. I know a lot of other folks did in interviews, TV, radio, everywhere. And I don't know if folks just weren't listening or they just had this sort of deep faith, however misplaced, in American exceptionalism and this idea that of our enduring democratic institutions and we're just crying wolf.
I don't think it's open. It is incredibly obvious. It's incredibly unsubtle. But the fact that it's not open allowed people who were more traditional Republican voters and who certainly were willing to tolerate a lot of these dog whistles to tell themselves that, no, in the end, he's going to be a traditional Republican and, he's only against, the wrong kinds of immigrants and so on. I think to us, that distinction seems so artificial between him being bleedingly obvious and incredibly unsubtle and just straightforwardly open. But I actually do think it makes a difference. I think if Donald Trump stood up and said, look, I just think that black people are inferior and as president, I don't think I should represent them. They just do not matter. I do think that actually some of the people who ended up voting for Trump would have balked. So to me, what's disappointing is not that so many Americans are willing to vote for an openly racist candidate. I don't think that's exactly right. What's disappointing is how thin the veneer of non-racism has to be for a lot of Americans to be willing to vote for a candidate.
And that also gets us to colorblind and modern racism. But pushing back just a little bit with Trump, literally saying that Mexicans, Hispanics, Latinos are almost basically said they're a race of rapists and killers. Wink, wink, white supremacists and white nationalism and their endorsement of him. The way that he surrounded himself. Think about another era. I never thought I'd live to see the moment where you have his inner circle. You have Bannon, Gorka, the two Millers and others who are quite literally, and we can parse the language, white supremacists / white nationalists / ethno-nationalists. And there's so many things going on that the corporate news media simply isn't focusing in on this. Every day there's something that could lead the news cycle for a week or a month.
I actually have to say that the American press over the last months has come out pretty well. Now, you're right that there's so many things going on, but it's very, very difficult for newspapers to keep up and frankly difficult for readers to make sure that they pay attention to all of the things that is written in newspapers that's important. But one of the rays of light to me in the last months has been the dogged